Welcome to It's Your Wealthy podcast edition. I'm certified financial planner David Somerville. I'm joined here today on today's show by financial advisor Cody Miller and financial advisor Drake Somerville. How you doing, guys?
Excellent.
Good.
All's good?
Things are great. We got the Canadian Open coming up. We got the U.S. Open after that. I just played my best round of the year. Life is good. What else do we want?
I want my best round of the year. That's what I want.
It's coming.
I'm glad you had your best round of the year, and you probably had your best round of the year. So I will have my best round. I'm a money guy. Under pressure, club championship, that's where it all comes out. Not on these weekend golf games. But I digress. But welcome to the show, folks. We have a great show today. We're going to talk about the top 10 financial issues facing Canadian step families. Now, the divorce rate in Canada is hovering at a whopping roughly 50%. Around the world, it's north of 50%. And one of the biggest challenges, I think, Drake and Cody, is when you try to combine these families, right? So first family is easy. Mom and dad have the kids. It all goes to the kids. It's all about the kids, right? Second families, you've got some of these big issues. And you know what? Step families just don't blend households. They're blending financial systems. They're blending tax profiles. They're blending legal obligations. They're blending inheritances down the road. So there's a lot of concerns then, a lot of issues that are happening here. And the first one I want to get into is on the top 10 issues facing Canadian step families is, competing financial obligations with child and spousal support. So, many step families are managing through, you've got child support from a previous relationship. I've got to pay spousal support to my previous wife. Now I have my new family, and I have all those expenses that go into it with the household, with maybe the new partner has children involved, like you're supporting 2, 3, 4, 5 children. So the result in this area dramatically is it's a cash flow issue, and it's often going to be really tight when it comes to people who are in this situation. Even with those in high income, they still find things to be really challenging.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, and I think the other thing that happens is, the second thing I would say is estate planning conflicts. This is probably the biggest issue that we see. Everything has to be extremely precise when it comes to estate planning, as you know, right? And when you increase the complexity in the estate planning process by having multiple blended families, you have to increase the level of that precision, right? And so what we end up seeing is they need the right advice. They need the right person to sort of walk them through how that goes, and that avoids litigation. I think this is the number one area of litigation that we see is when you don't have precise estate planning.
Well, what's crazy is I've had a couple of cases where you have the people divorced, husband and wife divorce, wife goes one way, husband goes the other way. Husband remarries, has a new wife, has new children with the new wife, right? And then he's got his older kids from the previous marriage. He has his newer kids. And then you've got everybody looking at the whole situation. It's a really difficult, challenging topic. And that's why, again, Cody, you've got to get some
but you know what I shouldn't say the great thing, but it's not an uncommon situation, right? It's something that we are familiar with. It's something we have experience with. It's something we know how to manage. And so if you have the right set of eyes and the right person on it who is emotionally separated from the situation, it can make all the difference.
Exactly. Drake?
And I think, there's a pretty common scenario that we see is when, one partner brings a home or a business and the other brings fewer assets. And I think without structure, ownership feels unequal and breakups can become financially messy.
Well, it's difficult, right? What happens if you break up with your spouse, you go into a new relationship, maybe she has all the wealth because her previous husband maybe left her a bunch of the wealth. You don't have as much. That's a difficult situation with an unequal asset value. Or the husband, the male has more money and the female has less money. So there's some difficult financial juggling that has to happen with these types of structures. Number 4 here on the top 10 financial issues facing Canadian step families is you've got complicated tax structures, especially if you're an entrepreneur, if you're a business owner. So for incorporated business owners, you've got to start thinking about, do I start drawing income out as a dividend, as a salary? That can be complicated. What about my corporate assets? What do I leave to my my elder kids from my previous marriage? What do my younger kids get? Obviously, there's going to be some tax deferral strategies that can create the imbalance. And again, what about saving tax for today, where that could create some conflict down the road? The one good thing about this is sometimes insurance as a product, life insurance as a product, can fix a lot of these issues.
Absolutely. Yeah, I mean, it obviously a lot of what we're talking about is tension that gets created. And so I refer to it as mine, yours, ours financial tension, right? You've got these step families and they're struggling with joint versus separate accounts. Who's going to pay for which parts of the children's extracurricular activities or clothes or trips or those types of things. And oftentimes what happens, I mean, look, my wife and I are together, right? But we have different philosophies sometimes when it comes to money. And so I would imagine you add two other people into the equation who have different philosophies. And now all of a sudden you've got a lot of different outlooks on how things should go. And you need to be able to create some cohesion around the structure.
Well, years ago, what happened was I wrote an article for a magazine in Niagara Falls. It went out to about 60,000 homes. It was called Why a Blended Family Needs Its Own Game Plan. And it's funny, right? You start thinking about how a blended family comes together. Again, you've got difference in income, difference in assets. One's got elder kids, one's got smaller kids. So really a blended family does need to have its own game plan going forward.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and the sixth point I want to make here is insurance planning often has gaps. So most insurance is underused, it's poorly structured, it's not aligned with blended family obligations, and the result is that dependents are not equally protected if something happens.
You know what, Drake, that's a great point. And having life insurance, and it doesn't cost that much these days. Life insurance is really a fairly inexpensive product, but what a benefit it is where you have your new partner, you have your new spouse. Maybe you don't have the assets you wish you had because you've given up some of those assets on your divorce. But again, putting a $500,000 insurance policy in place for your new family, for a few dollars a day is a great way to plan for that gap, Drake. Number 7 here on some of the top 10 financial issues in Canadian step families is inadequate retirement alignment. And this is important, right? So what happens if one spouse is 60, one spouse is 50, that one spouse is getting really close to the finish line, the other spouse is much further behind? You've got different retirement timelines, you've got an unequal pension or RSP accumulation, and then what you've got happening here with this inadequate retirement alignment is one partner can end up subsidizing the other unintentionally. So retirement, again, going back to the blended family needs its own game plan, is just retirement alone. That's a whole hour conversation with the client and the couple in the boardroom.
Yeah, no doubt. I think, the other thing we talk about a lot with clients as well in this situation is having very clear legal agreements when it comes to these things, right? So we talk about cohabitation agreements. A lot of people want to get marriage contracts the second time around, whether that's prenups or post-ups, to make sure that everything is very clearly articulated. I think what happens a lot of times when you don't have clear agreement on the legal side is family law takes over. And the family law very rarely matches the intent of what clients are trying to achieve. Let's have those discussions on the front end, right? They're not easy. I have to be very clear about this. They're not always very easy discussions to have, but they're important, they're valuable, and everybody feels better at the end.
Well, I've been in many cases where the new spouse comes in with the husband and it's a remarriage, and her biggest concern is, number one, she loves her husband, but number two is she says to me, it has to be okay. If something happens to him, I have to be okay, because a lot of his wealth may be going back to his own children.
Sure.
So again, the insurance is a good fit. One thing I always say too is that anybody can afford to divorce once. You can't afford to divorce twice. Like, divorcing once is expensive. Divorcing a second and third time, it's a wipeout, right? So again, that's why, Cody, getting good advice on the legal documents, on the pension documents, on a plan, on a strategy, it puts both parties at a sense of ease.
Yeah, and I think another thing to plan early for is education funding imbalances, right? So like RESP planning becomes complicated when like only biological children are beneficiaries. Contributions are uneven. One partner has more dependents than the other. And I think that this often creates long-term resentment, like if you don't plan for it early.
Well, imagine having a new partner and your kids are 16 and 17 and they've got a fully funded education plan for their future, right? and your brand new spouse, your beloved spouse, has kids that are 13 and 14, and there's been nothing in place for them. That would be a difficult table conversation.
Yep.
So Drake, you're completely right, is having a clear vision or a clear mandate to help fund those imbalances. And it's a tough one, right? So, it's something that I think it's hard to solve on your own, these issues. This is why it's really important to go get some competent financial advice. Let us be the bad or good guy. But if you try and have these conversations with your beloved, either husband, wife to husband, whatever it may be, we might not be having a happy conversation or a happy evening.
Well, I always think our strongest value proposition in those situations is our impartiality. We don't have a preference from one side or the other, right? Where when you're in those situations, it's hard not to be emotionally invested in the outcome. We get to take a step back from it and really come up with a very clear plan that has everybody's best interest in mind. And we spend a lot of time on that discovery process as well, making sure we understand what is important to each party, what are we trying to accomplish. Of course, one of the things that always comes out is everybody wants what's best for the children, right? And so that's why, like you said, Drake, planning for that ahead of time, everybody can usually come to some agreement on that.
Exactly, Cody. And the last key point here on the 10 financial issues facing Canadian step families is estate liquidity problems. So even with the best intentions are clear, you've got assets that are tied up in real estate or businesses. You've got taxes on death that must be paid. Executors may be forced to sell assets quickly, and this can dramatically disrupt the inheritance plan. So again, having the new wills, having the wills structured properly, having the insurance in place, having a financial plan, having a plan that provides for the less fortunate partner in their relationship. These are all really, really big things. And, just a key insight here is, the step family's financial problems usually don't come from a lack of money. They come, Cody, from a lack of structure around the money that's already existing, right? So it's important that I think if you're out there right now and you've got a blended family and you're into a new relationship, it's not bad to come in, see one of us, have a conversation about the plan, the next 10, 20-year plan, because probably your best investment you'll make is keeping your new spouse happy, making sure the kids are in a good spot, make sure there's some family harmony, and make sure that there's nothing gets left to chance.
This is definitely one of the cases that we get quite often where there's not a one-size-fits-all solution, right? Every single scenario is a little bit unique and a little bit different, and everybody has their own spin on what it is they're trying to accomplish. So, couldn't agree more.
As I always say, blended families don't just need money, they need clarity, right? So clarity is a big thing. Drake Somerville, thanks for coming in again this week. Really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Cody Miller, again, continued with your golf success in the next 30 days, and we'll check back in 30 days to see how you're performing, right?
Thanks, Dave.
Against the old dog. And for those out there, don't forget to share the podcast. And we are on the YouTube network. We're on Spotify. We're on Apple iTunes. And again, thanks for tuning into It's Your Wealth, and we'll see you back in 30 days.